And Bob Thompson, former Fox Sports president, joins us on 365 Sports. Paul Catalina, Craig Smoak, and David Smoak. And Bob, thank you for being on today. When you saw Pete Thamel's report, or you saw what was in the report, was there a couple of things in particular that perhaps jumped out to you on what it actually means?
Yeah, the first thing that kind of jumped out to me was normally people don't send out press releases that they're starting early negotiations. So that led me to believe that was a message for somebody. The other thing was that it didn't specifically say exclusive negotiations, which is an entirely different thing than just starting early negotiations. So those were the two things that kind of struck me right off the bat.
Bob, you kind of threw out a scenario there where this could get kind of everybody happy. USC and UCLA out, Texas and Oklahoma out, the Pac-12 and Big 12 with new TV deals. How likely do you think that would be to happen?
I don't know. I worked for a couple of big deal makers in my life, and their counsel to me was always think big. You can always pare it back at the end. But, if people want to get creative, you can solve and tie up a lot of loose ends with a few deals here. And it's pretty simple. The Pac-12 and the Big 12 renew some sort of deals that are acceptable with Fox and ESPN. They continue to share the packages as they have in the past. OU and Texas get out of the Big 12 early. SC and UCLA get out of the Pac-12 early. That benefits both Fox in terms of the Big Ten and ESPN in terms of the SEC. There's some details to clean up. CBS, did they trade out there last year? What's the compensation potentially to the Pac-12 and the Big 12 for those schools leaving early? But those are details. This stuff can be done if people get creative and, concede sort of the vision at the end as opposed to the morass that they're dealing with right now.
Bob, does this tell us anything at all about what the Big Ten might still eventually be planning for?
I don't think so. It could smoke them out, I guess. And if there's a belief that somehow both of these conferences are about to make a deal, or certainly are in discussions, it could cause them to, maybe move now as opposed to later.
Yeah, I just ask because, and I know a lot of it's just rumors and speculation, and you see all that over Twitter, but it does seem like the kind of constant question mark throughout this was those West Coast schools and the late window and Oregon, Washington, and all of that. And I was just trying to figure out if this really told us anything about the Ducks or the Cardinal or the Huskies and where they kind of sit in the scheme of things.
I think the only thing that'll tell that is when the Pac-12 gets the deal, how long is it for and how solid is the grant of right?
Right.
I really think so. The other thing is, I don't know if the SEC or the Big Ten necessarily want to be that guy that says, I put a bullet in the Pac-12.
Right.
There's a lot of history there. And so and I don't know exactly how the deal reads with the Big 12 or the Big 10 as it relates to adding schools. And if there's, good faith negotiations to, increase the deal based on new members coming in. I understand there's a number for Notre Dame, but I can't imagine there's a number for anybody else. So, I don't know. 5 years 6 years isn't that far away. So if the Big 10 wants to wait, it's not an eternity.
Right.
Bob, does this mean in any way is this a sign from ESPN that they're not going to go deep into the Pac-12 when it comes to any kind of a new, not that they won't, but they wouldn't go all in, so to speak, with the Pac-12 with the TV deal?
I don't think they will go all in with the Pac-12 with no Big 12.
Yeah, no. Okay. Also,
no, I don't think that. I mean, they lost a bunch of windows with the Big Ten. They still need content, and they need. On top of that, they need basketball content, and you can't lose the Big 12 and the Big 10 from ESPN standpoint, from a football and a basketball standpoint, and be able to fill all the mouths that they've got to feed over there in Bristol.
Is there any advantage the Big 12 might have moving forward if they actually get a hard number because of whatever these discussions produce rather than just speculative?
Possibly. I think really now probably what you're going to have is, two trains going down parallel paths here. And I don't know if they continue to go at that rate, I don't know that any one conference has an advantage over the other in terms of, finalizing a deal. I think they're going to move at their natural speed. These things usually take longer than than everybody thinks. I mean, just look at the Big Ten. And, whether they're in an exclusive window or not, I made some comments that, I looked at the Pac-12 press release and it mentioned nothing about an exclusive deal. But I'm told that, in fact, it was, confirmed by the conference that they did trigger the exclusive window. So my guess is they're now out of that. So they're talking to whoever they want to talk to. The Big 12 would probably, I would assume that the reason they're talking is that the TV guys came and said, let's talk now. Because the TV guys are trying to get this all sorted out so that they can figure out, what their cost levels are going forward and what the deals are looking like going forward. Because right now there's a lot of unknowns. You know what the Big Ten is, but there's still a lot of unknowns out there as it relates to the Pac-12 and the Big 12, and the networks want to get that straightened out.
Do you think that there will be any kind of mirroring in these TV deals, not necessarily network-wise, but length of contract-wise, grant of rights-wise, things like that? Because like we talked about the last time you were on the show, Bob, the Big Ten can get their deal done twice before the SEC does once, and probably 5 or 6 times before the ACC ever comes to market again.
Yeah, I think, if these deals expiring in a couple of years, 24, 25, that they're probably going to go to, maybe 31. You let the Big Ten go first, but you go, and so they can kind of set a market, but then you go before the SEC, which I think is in 32 or maybe 34. I don't know, but before the SEC, and certainly well before the ACC in 36. But you got to remember that the length, even those guys are long, that means nothing. I mean, if the conferences or the network wants to open the deals up, I guarantee the conference would be more than willing to listen early.
Bob, do you think that some of the changes that are occurring across college football, I mean, how much of that is paid attention to by TV execs in terms of how much do you think some of the changes could add value to the sport or decrease value in the sport, or does that not matter at all?
No, I think it matters. I think especially as you look forward to, an expanded college football playoff, which, who's going to be funding that, and that's the network.
Right.
And I think it's important for the college football playoff to incorporate, schools from coast to coast, not just, Big Ten and SEC. So in order for the college football playoffs to really, reach its full potential on an expanded basis at either 12 or 16 teams, you've got to have a number of broadcast networks interested in it, and those networks have to feel that there's going to be appeal for that tournament or that playoff scenario from the ACC out to the Pac-12. You can't have just something down the middle of the country in the Southeast.
Is there too much overreaction anytime a conference releases a statement like the Big 12 or Brett Yormark did today, and there's, oh, my God, or was this significant in your mind?
It's only significant in my mind because I can't ever recall anybody doing it. I think when the Pac-12 announced theirs, there was a message. And I think when the Big 12 announced theirs, I think it was a similar message. And I guess that message could be to existing members, don't look around because we're doing something here. And to potential members, don't do anything that might lock you up too long because we're doing something over here. So I think it was kind of a message sent both ways to existing members and also potential members.
I asked you this question when you put the scenario together about this would be the perfect scenario, or at least you mentioned it. And one of the thoughts about Texas and Oklahoma, if in fact they decide or they could leave early, what would ESPN get out of that? What would the Big 12 get out of it? Because they obviously are still going to want a big chunk of money that Texas and Oklahoma would be paying to leave the conference.
Well, I think the ESPN gains by getting the Texas and OU to the SEC early. The conference, and I know that ESPN doesn't expect that they're going to get that for free. And I think the combination between what ESPN can do for the Big 12 in terms of a new rights deal, what Texas and OU could kick in to the conference to get out early and get to the SEC early. And the other thing is what ESPN gains by getting Texas out and being able to shut down Longhorn Network early and saving some money there. So there's a variety of things that the Big 12 could actually glean by having Texas and OU leave early. And some of them aren't as apparent as others, but in a deal like this, it's not a rounding error, but it's not a rounding error, but it's not a ton of money in the big scheme of things.
When your Mark released what he released, what you surprised it was now, or was it something that you were waiting on in the first place? You said rarely do these things go out, but was this something that could have been released a month ago when he first started? Could this have been 3 months from now? Was there a meaning that you said there's a meaning because it's now?
No, I think that, there's a meaning because it's now. And if this was, in fact, as I've been told, that it was instigated by the TV partners, not the conference. The TV guys went to the conference, and probably because of the situation that they're in discussions with the Pac-12, they want to get the Big 10 or the Big 12 on the table as well. Plus, they've finished the Big 10 deal, so it's like, okay, what's next? And so to get these two deals that are kind of hanging out there completed as quickly as possible so that everybody has certainty going forward makes a lot of sense. So I don't know that there's any significance to the fact that it was today as opposed to a week ago, other than a week ago people were still talking about the Big 10 deal. Now the networks have all kind of taken a breath after that and said, okay, what's next? And it's the Big 12 and Pac-12.
Well, Bob, you referenced this a little bit earlier, but I thought I'd just pass along this news from Ross Dellinger, who said that college football playoff presidents will meet Friday and determine the next evolution of the playoff with a potential vote to expand in 2026 and, if unanimous, as early as 2024. So that would certainly potentially play into the grand scheme of things, it seems like.
Without a doubt. I saw that right before you guys called. And, the one thing you got to keep in mind is in order for them to do it early, there's got to be some opening of the ESPN agreement. And so that's, it's a very similar situation to what we're talking about with the Big 12 and the Pac-12. There's probably some exclusive window in that deal, and ESPN has some preferential rights as it relates to that. But they can vote for it, and sure, it could be unanimous, but they're still going to have to deal with the existing television agreement in place with ESPN in order to expand.
From a television network's perspective, though, would they have wanted that to? I mean, last year this came up, and then Kevin Warren successfully kind of duped two conferences into joining him in this. We've got issues to work out on the playoff deal until he got what he wanted. The issues weren't really macro issues; they were mostly his. But wouldn't the network want that to be early because that means that they're going to make more money?
Well, I think the question becomes, does it make sense for the CFP to want it early if they only have the ability to deal with one network?
Okay.
The whole idea, I think, with the expanded CFP is to get more than one broadcast partner into the mix and, give everybody a taste, just like the NFL playoffs. I mean, now with ABC having a game, everybody's in the NFL playoffs. For years, ABC was kind of on the outside looking in. And now last year they had a game. And I think it's the same, they're looking at this with an NFL mentality. And I think after seeing how the Big 10 deal broke out and the fact that it is basically an NFL model, I think certainly going forward with the CFP playoffs, it would behoove those guys to kind of look at the NFL and try and replicate a playoff scenario as it relates to the broadcasting side of it and have multiple partners with it, in the deal.
I asked you about ESPN with the Texas OU and all of that scenario. Fox has some of them too, Texas and Oklahoma. Would they want something in return if Texas and Oklahoma left early?
Yes, but likewise, ESPN has something with USC and UCLA, that they would probably like something in return. So there's a lot of trade fodder out here. There's a lot of swapping that can going on. I wrote, Fox traded Joe Buck to ESPN for some earlier picks in the Big 12, in the Big 10, and NBC traded, or ABC traded Al Michaels to NBC to the rights for something that's called Oswald Rabbit, whatever that is. So these guys could, those are little, but this isn't that, when there's so many moving pieces, it almost makes the deal easier to finalize because you've got a lot of trade fodder.
Yeah, Bob, that was Walt Disney's first cartoon was Oswald the Rabbit. So Disney's done nothing with it other than just have it.
Made for some good press, though.
I guess my last question is: it now when we see these conferences release this, or we see that this conference is negotiating whatever else, people want to put a win and a loss next to a conference or next to a network. Is that silly?
I think it is. I think you have to look at these types of things, and they are very well thought out before there's a release like that. There's probably a number of people sitting in rooms, commissioners, consultants, PR people, and a great deal of thought is given to how it's released, when it's released, and how long the release is. I can imagine they spent quite a bit of time deciding when to release it and just exactly the wording. And it's because it's designed to send a message of some sort to some group.
Bob, thanks for your time. We appreciate it as always. The knowledge, the experience of you negotiating dozens or hundreds of these things in the past. We appreciate it. Thank you.
My pleasure, guys. Take care. Have a good week.
You too. Bob Thompson. He's got his own company when it comes to what he does as a consultant and, of course, a former Fox Sports president. I know